Ivanishvili has made it rather clear that the only thing that matters to him is his own money.
When wild animals see an existential threat, something like drought, for example, they stop eating each other.
Everybody wants to be number one, everybody wants to be prime minister, everybody wants to lead regime change.
In Ukraine, Russia is trying to achieve their goal by the use of weapons and bombs and tanks. In Georgia, they are basically using Ivanishvili and his regime to achieve exactly the same goal.
Now that's precisely what Russia has always wanted, to leave Georgia out of options.
What I don't see, sadly, any message that is coming from the opposition.
Georgia is not fighting for its own future, so then why shall we? It's possible, it's doable, we can do it. We can really do it.
Hello and welcome to Talk Georgia, my English podcast covering Georgian and regional politics. Talk Georgia is brought to you by Droeba Media Group, a trusted source of very high-quality news and analytical media product. And GSAC, a think tank providing comprehensive political analysis of Georgia and wider Black Sea region, also academic and practical training for postgraduate students and mid-career professionals. To dive into the big questions of the Georgian politics, today we're joined by Tina Bokuchava, chair of United National Movement, one of the oldest and one of the most experienced political parties on the Georgian political landscape. Tina is US educated at almost all levels. The high school, college, university, so she graduated from Smith College and read political science, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And later on did her master's degree at Tufts University, Fletcher School of Law. She mastered diplomacy and law.
Yes, absolutely.
She's a visiting professor at University of Georgia.
Unfortunately not.
No
to
longer.
my great dismay, actually, because politics doesn't allow me that time, which would be great to go into academia, but perhaps in the near future. That's
Three times a member of Georgian Parliament, if not more. She was one of the youngest members of Georgian Parliament, if not the youngest.
That's a myth.
Myth?
Yes.
Or Georgi Kandelaki was the one that was the youngest.
No, there was a female member that I believe was the youngest, but I was 29 years old when I was first elected to Parliament in 2012 on UNM proportionate list.
So it means that then you look youngest.
Well,
or from
that's
the
something
MPs,
that I'm not going to argue about. But 2012, then it was 2016. Then 2020 and 2024, unfortunately, the quality of the elections didn't allow us to recognize these elections as legitimate, and therefore the fourth term didn't materialize. But I hope, and we'll have a chance to discuss this, that we'll soon have free and fair parliamentary elections where we can resume parliamentary work.
I hope. But my question, first question basically, is about that. Because of your education, you had a chance to, and probably you wanted, because you studied law, you studied diplomacy, so you could have been high-ranking diplomat, you could have practiced law, you could have been in the executive branch, which is more stable. Mm-hmm. What brought you to party politics, which is the most unstable part of wider politics?
Well, thank you, first of all, for...
And what I want to also remind our viewers that she's married to Professor Kote Yoseliani, and she has 3 wonderful sons.
So he's the professor at Georgia University, at University of Georgia. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations on your podcast. I think it's extremely important for English-speaking audiences. To have first-hand information on Georgian politics, because I think the stakes are very high, not just nationally, but also regionally and globally, I would argue. And therefore, I think it's very important, the undertaking that you have started. And so I'm honored to be one of your guests, and thank you for the invitation. As to your question on my choice to enter politics,
was it your choice, or was it the circumstance?
So let me elaborate, and you can make your own conclusion. But in 2012, the circumstance was such that the UNM was in government. I had previously served as the deputy ambassador of Georgia to the United Nations, and at that time the bilateral relationship was also subsumed under one embassy. So I was both subsequently, once the ambassador was moved as health minister. You may recall Ivanishvili, a very experienced diplomat who had previously served as an ambassador to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. I became the acting ambassador, both for the multilateral relationship to the UN and other international organizations, and for the bilateral relationship with the Swiss Confederation. So it was a tremendous responsibility and an opportunity for me, because as you have said in your introduction, I had studied international law, I had studied diplomacy, and of course, for that profession, Geneva is the place to be. And it was a great responsibility and an honor for me to be able to put in practice the academic work and acumen that I had gathered throughout the years, both at the Fletcher School, during undergraduate studies at Smith College, and subsequently also at the Geneva Institute of International Studies, where I had studied European human rights law as well as WTO law. And in fact, that was the year when I was serving in Geneva when Russian accession to the WTO was negotiated. And literally I was able to appear at the negotiating table vis-a-vis the Russians when the Swiss were our mediators, with the very textbooks that had accompanied me throughout my studies. So of course it's an honor to be able to work in your country's national interest at that level. But I was subsequently offered, I dare say, a rather controversial position back in Georgia, which I viewed as a temporary undertaking of monitoring the illicit financial spending that was taking place on the part of Bidzina Ivanishvili.
I remember that time, sir.
Yes. I spent a few months at the State Audit Office leading up to the 2012 October parliamentary elections that brought about regime change, that brought about peaceful transfer of power, the first electoral peaceful transfer of power in our country, in our region. So leading up to that, I spent several months there, and the original plan, in fact, was that I would appear on the parliamentary list to subsequently transferred back to the foreign ministry to serve as the deputy foreign minister. That was the understanding that we had reached, not because necessarily of the volatility and the instability that you mentioned, but because at that time I was not married and didn't have kids, but the type of public life that accompanies the life of a politician was not necessarily a choice. And like I said, given my academic studies, I had always wanted to serve my country as a diplomat. And the ultimate goal, of course, was to serve our national interest of integration into NATO and the European Union. So I wanted to do work to contribute to that. But unfortunately, we are where we are. And, since 2012, it's been this iteration of elections where you sort of are, you feel a certain responsibility to continue to fight for your country. So,
sure. Let's move on. The current affairs. That is, there's plenty to discuss. But before that, I want to ask you this question. I'm pretty sure that our international audience is particularly interested in that. I'm sure you also and some of the other political leaders see Ivanishvili's regime as an existential threat to Georgia's national interests and also to the parties parties and also some of the other organizations as well. I mean, civil society organizations, the critical media. And I think that this is a universal rule, not only among humans, if you ask me, but even among animals in the jungles or in savannas or elsewhere. When wild animals see an existential threat, something like drought, for example, and they stop eating each other. They stop fighting amongst each other, and, for example, when there is time to go to the river to drink water, maybe some tigers and wolves and, I don't know, deers and rabbits and all that, they go together to drink water. And they don't kind of fight each other. Once they see that they've already survived the drought, the existential threat, they will go back to their normal way of life, and they start, the tigers will start eating some of the other animals, etc., etc. So what I heard from political leaders from almost all groups that cleared the threshold after last year's parliamentary elections, it seemed that everybody agreed that Ivanishvili and his regime is an existential threat to everyone, to the country and to their own parties and the party landscape in Georgia. And somehow was still not possible, these four groups, to stick together. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the primary reason for that, from your perspective and in your opinion? Is it because some of the political leaders did not genuinely believe that the Ivanishvili was an existential threat to all of them, mm-hmm. and still they saw some of their political party interests more important, or competition more important, or I don't know, anything more important than the threat that was coming from Ivanishvili? Or it was something else? I mean, what was it? Because I think that there was a clear demand from the public, from their voters. Mm-hmm. They were demanding this unity, and also I think it is obvious, and it was obvious, that to defeat Ivanishvili, unity was essential.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, absolutely. And that is why not only my personal position, but the position of the party, which I chair since June of last year, has been calls for unification in the opposition. We've been very public about it. We've been very forward about it. President Mikhail Saakashvili, who, as you know, has been incarcerated for almost 4 years on political grounds, has also made these calls of unification. But, the question as to why it is that the opposition has been unable to unify, I think it's a combination of factors, but I would highlight two primary ones. One, something that you hinted at, which is failure to correctly identify and evaluate the urgency of the situation. And second, quite bluntly put, I think is egos, that everybody wants to be number one, everybody wants to be prime minister, everybody wants to lead regime change, and that's not really how politics is done, and that's not how leaders are born either. So unfortunately, I think it's those two primary factors. And in terms of your analogy from the desert, or the analogy that you brought on from the drought, rather. I genuinely believe that the political forces that have currently chosen to cooperate with the regime in participating in what we have coined as a Russian special operation on October 4th, which is the local government election, is an obstruction of our common path to the river during or after a drought. I mean, it's really helping. It's obstructing that road, and unfortunately, it's helping the prolongation of the drought, or to use your analogy and to use the political terminology, it's the prolongation of the political crisis. Because, what we need to solve the current political crisis, it's internal pressure and external pressure. And for both, it's extremely important to have clarity of purpose and to have unity. And as soon as you cause fragmentation, it makes your position less clear to your international partners, and therefore makes their responses a little bit also, more protracted perhaps than they otherwise would be, although we can talk about that. And on the national front, yes, it causes disunity and a cacophony and some confusion and perhaps even apathy. And that, of course, is precisely what Bidzina Ivanishvili wants, because he feeds off of that apathy and he feeds off of disorientation. It was very unfortunate. But about Gahari, honestly, I never really had any illusions that he would cooperate with the regime. That's where he's coming from. He's political career has given us plenty of reasons to have made this prognosis. However, for Lelo, it was truly unfortunate. I think also very disappointing, even to people that voted for them during October 26th parliamentary elections.
When the division is so clear now, and I don't see unity in the perspective, and the relatively bigger opposition parties are in favor of taking part into the local elections, and the other two, including your own, are supporting idea of boycotting and resistance and resilience. What is the way out, do you think? What is the way forward?
I think the way forward is still exerting, external and internal pressure on the government. I think we're in a good position internationally. Like I said, it would certainly have helped to have had a unified front from the opposition and to be speaking in a single voice. However, nevertheless, I think our international partners are very much cognizant of the fact that they have to act, and they have to act now. And I think yesterday's statements coming out from the Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels was certainly reflective of that realization that it's time to act. We have time and again called for the publication of the letter that was sent as a result of yesterday's Foreign Affairs Council meeting. Of course, the Georgian Dream is unwilling to publicize the letter because they know full well that we're telling the truth about it and they are not. But I think it's rather clear, and the European Union has been somewhat public about what's in the letter. And I'm rather certain that there is a demand for the release of political prisoners, all political prisoners, politicians and non-politicians alike, of course. There's also the revocation, the rescinding of all the draconian laws that were recently adopted that have made the electoral environment significantly more restricted, that essentially leave no room, no democratic space for political activity to take place.
Absolutely.
As well as the restrictions on civil society and media organizations, et cetera, that will allow for a new free and fair election to take place. I mean, if these conditions are met that are delineated in this letter, then Georgia will be considered to be returning to somewhat of a normalization of the situation. And if not, and the deadline is also clearly outlined, and the deadline is August 31st, then the European Union will have to review visa-free travel, which is a privilege that Georgia and Georgian citizens were granted based on our common values and the fulfillment of these values and criteria that are the basis of our relationship. So, I really hope that this is a wake-up call also to the people that possibly still support the Georgian dream regime, and a realization that the opposition and the government critics in general, the political democratic forces and the media, civil society organizations, that they've been telling the truth all along, that, this threat is real. And it's very important also for Georgian citizens to know that this was not sort of the first choice for the European Union. The European Union would have much rather sanctioned Ivanishvili personally. But for that, you need the consensus and therefore the agreement of all 27 member states. And with a government in Hungary that's openly expressing support for Ivanishvili and Putin, more importantly, he's essentially using his veto power to prevent Ivanishvili personally and his cronies from being sanctioned. And rather than the European Union has to perhaps resort to a last measure of reversing visa-free, because in that case, the agreement of 27 member states is not needed, and rather just a qualified majority is necessary. So it's really very Putinist in the way that he's sort of sabotaging Ivanishvili, the European system, and a rules-based system to his advantage. This is very typical of Putin and Putinist regimes. Just like as we remember, in order for Orban to agree to the decision of the European Union to provide assistance to Ukraine, he was basically trying to extort money from the European Union that had been frozen because of his anti-democratic moves. So extortion, hostage negotiations, as Ivanishvili regularly does when he takes political prisoners as hostages, are Putin's negotiation tactics. And I think the European Union and in West in general have not only woken up to the fact that Putin has gotten away with too much with extortion, with hostage negotiations, and with blackmail, but that also Ivanishvili over the years has gotten away with too much with extortion, hostage negotiation, and blackmail.
I think our conversation shifted itself towards international relations naturally, and I'll kind of try to dig into that. I know that recently you visited United Kingdom, and you frequently visit Washington as well as Brussels. But my question to you is this. It's been already quite a while that European Union is trying to put targeted sanctions on place. But as you rightly mentioned, it is not possible because of there is no consensus over that. And sometimes Orban, sometimes Fico, they are trying to block it. And that's normal. This is how European Union works. But when something is truly important for the European Union, for example, let's say I think it's they are getting ready for the 18th package of sanctions against Russia. That means that they already adopted 17 packages, the sanctions. And every time, as you also mentioned, that Orban is kind of opposing it, and at the end of it, finally, there is enough pressure exerted on Orban to persuade him to agree with the sanctions against Russia, even though he is a partner with Putin. So why can't we generate exactly the same process? Why there is not enough pressure on Orban from some of our European partners, for example, or are we lobbying it correctly, or maybe we're making some mistakes there in terms of properly lobbying it? Because again, on the same meeting as you mentioned yesterday, when the Foreign Affairs Council met. Exactly the same targeted sanctions were adopted against some of the Moldovan politicians and businessmen and some propagandists that advance Russian interests in Moldova. And on that case, unity and consensus was possible to achieve. But in Georgian case, it was not possible, and on targeted sanctions, no decision was made. Okay, my question is here, what else could be done to generate the unanimity in the European Union, as it is done with the Russian issue or Moldovan issue this time? Or maybe our European partners don't, I mean, we are demanding actions from them, but they might not see enough action on the Georgian street or from the Georgian politicians. What is your take on this?
Well, I mean, I can tell you the conversations that I've had with European leaders on the sidelines of the Brussels Forum, which took place recently in Brussels. I had the opportunity to speak with VP, with the Vice President and High Representative on International Affairs, Kaja Kallas, as well as on the sidelines of the EPP, the European People's Party, of which UNM is a long-time voting member, in fact. I also spoke with President Ursula von der Leyen, where we had our delegation had a bilateral meeting with her. And I can tell you, as well as many other meetings that we've had with members of the Commission, from Marta Kos's office and Costa's office and other national meetings that we've had from European Union countries. I can tell you that is precisely the focus that we have in every single communication, the one that you're outlining, that it's very important to find a way, something that I spoke about already, to bypass the Hungarian veto, either get him on board or to find some way to bypass the veto and impose sanctions on Ivanishvili and his cronies, rather than, because of Orban, who is sabotaging the European decision-making process, have to move to a qualified majority decision-making process of suspending visa-free. And there are numerous things that it can do, whether it's sort of a transactional proposition to Orban, where it becomes worth it to him to turn his back to his friend and partner. That's actually, we had a closed dinner where Friedrich Merz was in attendance, and Ursula von der Leyen and Roberta Metsola and others. And that's actually, because I said it, I can share it with you. I said, if there is any advantage to transactional politics, which is not the kind of politics we like to do, obviously. It's values-based politics, right? But if there is any advantage to it, is that there's always a price tag attached. And if you match the price, be it for Orban or Ivanishvili, you can come to some kind of a solution. And these people, obviously, I mean, Ivanishvili has made it rather clear that the only thing that matters to him is his own money, whether speaking about Credit Suisse and the millions that were involved in the litigation there, or whether the recent detention of a businessman who allegedly had a gun in his
hand luggage,
or whether it's the beating equivalent of torture, most certainly in the prison cell of Georgi Bachiashvili, who he apparently in the past used to refer to as his own son. He was such a trusted partner for Bidzina Ivanishvili. It is very clear that Ivanishvili's exclusive, not only primary, but exclusive interest is his own money. So he's very calculated and very transactional when it comes also to political decisions. And therefore, for the European Union, they can either find a sort of a transactional solution with Hungary, or there are other ways to bypass. I mean, if there is that political will. What needs to be done, I can tell you what we're doing, what our efforts are focused on. Like I previously said, of course, it would help if the opposition was speaking in a unified voice if when meeting, for example, with President Ursula von der Leyen, I wasn't just representing the United National Movement, which I'm proud to represent and is the only party that I've ever been member of. However, of course, it's a completely different conversation if you're speaking on behalf of the entire democratic political front of Georgia, such is the case, for example, in Belarus, when the Belarusian democratic political forces are speaking with outside actors. However, even in their case, the democratic forces were a bit too late to come to the realization that they should unify, and were forced into exile, and that's where Mr. Gacharia is, and is nevertheless not stepping off his moral pedestal to pontificate about how righteous, his every single move is, and that's rather unfortunate, because that, of course, takes away from the kinds of serious and focused and action-oriented conversations that we all should be having in one voice with our counterparts. Like yesterday, for example, I heard that he was there in Brussels, as the public also saw, and we've had opportunities, obviously, also to engage with various ministers in the sidelines of the Foreign Affairs Council, even with Minister Sikorsky and others. Even back in November, there was a common format. So that's a valuable opportunity, but it certainly shouldn't be used to criticize and badmouth, so to speak, other democratic political forces, but rather to focus on the primary problem at hand, and that is the Russian regime that has derailed Georgia's European integration. So that lack of unity, unfortunately, I think also plays a detrimental role in our ability to focus Europe's attention on Georgia.
And one more question about that. So you said that you had conversations with some of those high-ranking officials at European level, et cetera, and what I wonder, how do they see Georgian problem? Do they see it as a standalone problem? That Ivanishvili captured state, and he's a kind of consolidating his power and dictatorship in this country? Or do they see it as as you mentioned, Russia's special operation in Georgia, where Russia is achieving its own goal to basically capture Georgian state and obliterate sovereign Georgian state? Exactly the same way they are acting in Ukraine, but with the different methods. For example, in Ukraine, Russia is trying to achieve their goal by the use of weapons and bombs and tanks. In Georgia, they are basically using Ivanishvili and his regime to achieve exactly the same goal. Right, and my question is this: do our partners see it as a Russia special operation in Georgia by the use of Ivanishvili's regime, or a standalone issue about Georgia's democracy and Georgia, whether it is going to be a dictatorship or a democracy? And I don't know whatever is the case, but whatever it can be the case here, don't you think that if Georgia is perceived as a Russia special operation, the Georgian problem is perceived as a Russia special operation, it would be a lot easier then to punish Ivanishvili's regime for that as a part of a Russia sanction package. If, if Georgia's sanctions become part of Russia's sanctions, I think it would be a lot easier then to exert pressure on Orban or some of the other skeptics, as has been practiced already with the Russian sanctions. That's one thing that came to my mind. And second thing, I partly disagree with you about the visa-free suspension issue. I think that the visa-free suspension issue will come anyway. Regardless, European Union will be able to exert, let's say, personal sanctions on Ivanishvili and his cronies or not. Because, of course, the European Union is working on that, and that is just a matter of time when it happens. But at the same time, reasons why visa-free movement should be suspended is there. For example, these 8 I don't know, demands or points that they send out to the Georgia's de facto government, they wouldn't disappear even if Ivanishvili's regime is sanctioned from European side. So I think we should not be naive enough to believe that if at some point European Union gets this unity and consensus to sanction Ivanishvili, that would save us from suspension of the visa-free travel. No, I think it will come, if Ivanishvili's regime stays in this country, I think it will be a matter of time when visa-free is suspended, this autumn or next winter or whenever, because it will happen because there are reasons for that.
Yes, well, let me first speak about sanctions, and then we can go back to our discussion on visa-free. No, the European Union obviously doesn't look at Georgia in isolation. I mean, it would be extremely naive to do so, right? And no one is naive, and everybody has full and well woken up to the threat that Russia represents. I mean, we certainly wish that wake-up call would have come back in 2008 when, for example, President Saakashvili and others were warning the West that unless the West acted in a resolute fashion and responded to Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008, where the goal and the objective was identical to the one that Putin had in Ukraine, and that was the toppling of a democratically elected government led by President Saakashvili. But unfortunately, subsequently, a reset was offered from the United States, and there was essentially a normalization of relations with Russia, which I believe was a big mistake. And I think a lot of policymakers from those times are also publicly speaking about the fact that it really was a mistake, because if Russia had been deterred at that point, we would not have had the subsequent invasions in 2014 and then in 2022. So obviously now, with very different perception of what the Russian threat represents on the part of both the United States and the European Union in particular, I would say, Georgia is not seen in isolation at all. But it's also very important how we act, because I think it was a diplomat that accompanied Secretary Pompeo, but I might be mistaken, so I don't want to be quoting the wrong person, but one of the high official U.S. officials that was visiting Georgia said, you know, we want to help Georgians as much as they want to help themselves. And I think that's very important, what we do, how we respond to the Russian threats, how we are able to show our resilience up against the Russian propaganda. And part of that responsibility on the part of politicians, of course, is having found that common ground in responding to this common threat. But like I said, you know, I think some don't have realization of the urgency, although now that essentially, as you said, all political leaders, with the exception, all political party heads, with the exception of myself and Helen Khoshtaria, are under arrest. So I don't know how much worse the situation can become for people to realize that it's time to come together. I mean, particularly for a country that survived external threats and invasions for centuries, and our whole existence has been that, fending off enemies. And for a country whose national motto is strength and unity, it's really a huge disappointment.
Indeed.
But there is so much that an individual politician or an individual political party can do to try to bring political forces in particular together. So the Russian sanctions package, to go back to that very briefly, you know, in the conversations that we've had, I can tell you that there are various different sanctions regimes that are being considered, and one is, you know, human rights, another is corruption, and one, of course, is connection to the war. And I can assure you that evidence is being gathered, because, as many people know, Ivanishvili is quite litigious, and so he might try to appeal to the various courts, and so that evidence is being gathered. but that's certainly a connection that's there, and Western partners see it. They just need enough evidence to make sure that that sanctions case is properly built against him or some of his cronies. And to go back to the visa-free, which was the second part of your question, I mean, yes and no. Whether the reversal of visa-free travel is a matter of time, yes and no. Yes, because under the current circumstances, I agree with you that it's inevitable. However, what I hope for is that these circumstances will change, and we can, bring a change to the circumstance through our protest, through our resilience, through our non-cooperation, and through our unity. Because, like I previously said, Ivanishvili is a very transactional person, and despite the fact that a lot of his moves seem extremely irrational, because I think his paranoia has reached levels that have been unmatched in the past, where he trusts no one, where he suspects treason in everybody's actions and words. So that paranoia has made him extremely dangerous and has made him more irrational than he might have previously been. But in the end, I think when it comes to his existential threats, he will come to a realization that he just has so much to lose that he will have to make concessions. And these concessions are the ones that the Georgian people have been asking for from the protest, and now it's been echoed also from the West, including in this letter, in previous parliamentary resolutions from the European Parliament, as well as the Council of Europe, etc., etc. It is the release of political prisoners, it is the reversal of the laws, and allowing for an electoral environment where we can hold new, free elections.
Okay, let's move to more of a current affairs and what is going inside Georgia. And my feeling is that the Ivanishvili's key message to everyone is this, that, okay, I'm introducing a new normal, and maybe this seemed impossible in the past, let's say 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or even unthinkable, but now it is possible if I decide so. Well, he said that, okay, and obviously 2 years ago, if somebody asked me that, okay, the overwhelming majority of the political leaders would be in prison, I would say that's not possible. I mean, that's unthinkable. But now what Ivanishvili is trying to do, he introduced new normal to us and told us that is possible if I decide so. And it is. Then Ivanishvili told us that what I can do, he sent you personally, he sent you a message that, well, maybe 2 years ago it was impossible, but now it is possible to kidnap your husband and threaten you with something that is dearest to you, the life and health of your husband and children. Another new normal is that he says that, well, it was impossible a few years ago to pick up a fight with the American administration or UK government or European Union, but now I can pick up that fight and I can get away with it. And that's new normal because I decide so. He said that, okay, I can beat somebody to death in prison because I want his bitcoins. And this is new normal because I want it to be so. And the list is very long. And this is the message that is coming from him. And what I don't see, sadly, any message that is coming from the opposition. What is your counter message? Not your message personally, but what is that is coming from the opposition, or what is that it should be coming from the opposition? Because one of the reasons why a lot of people are disappointed about the political parties in this country is that what they don't see counter message. And they don't see that the new normal that Ivanishvili introduced, the opposition is not saying that we are going to disrupt this new normal by doing this and this and this and that. And when opposition leaders were jailed, I personally also was anticipating that a lot of party people would come out to the streets and do some of those extreme things to send a message to Ivanishvili that, okay, you are arresting our leaders and you are bringing this as normal. We would not accept that normal. And we would disrupt that normal, I don't know by what, by disrupting bus traffic or metro traffic or electricity supply or internet supply or anything. What is your counter message? And what it should be, you think? And maybe also the international partners don't see that. And it is important that to be seen, because only thing that disrupts this new normal today is the protest on Rustaveli Avenue. No matter how small it is, it still disrupts normal. Every single day, Rustaveli Avenue is blocked, no matter what. And there is no other message that is coming from the opposition, or maybe I don't see that.
Well, I think first and foremost, disrupting Ivanishvili's new normal is non-cooperation, because otherwise you're not disrupting, but rather accepting and becoming part of the new normal. You're normalizing the arrests. You're normalizing political persecution. You're normalizing torture. You're normalizing the use of draconian laws. And that is why it came to me, regrettably, as such a surprise that even the leaders that have become targeted by Ivanishvili's persecutions from their prison cells would nevertheless opt to become part of the new normal rather than resist. Because, as you said, and I completely agree with you, that the only thing that disrupts this new normal are the resilient, the persistent, the principled people that, have shown that for months you can have uninterrupted protest. In fact, they are the primary inspiration, I can tell you. I don't want any politician to take credit for this, as Gacharia tried yesterday, for example. They are the people on Rustaveli, and the resistance and the perseverance that they have shown, as well as the ones that are paying with their freedom for the freedom of this country, the musicians and the journalists, they're the primary source of inspiration for actions that we shall see coming from the European Union and other international partners. Because otherwise, I can assure you, they would have just written Georgia off. That, Georgia is not fighting for its own future, so then why shall we? These people are the ones that prove to the European Union that we are worth fighting for, which is why our responsibility rests with him, and it is such an utter disappointment that certain political leaders, and I mean Lelo here because I never had high expectations for Gacharia, that they opted not to listen to these very people because they're the voice of Georgia right now. It is their voices that matter. It is their voices that keep Georgia on the international radar. And it is their voice that keeps hope for Georgia's international partners that we still have a chance to revert to a democratic European way of life. What we can do is non-cooperation, is protest, is that it is 8 parties that have made a statement, a joint statement on non-cooperation with the government, the de facto government, and therefore non-participation in what we refer to as the Russian special operation of October 4th, that the government calls local government elections. It's 8 parties. That's a significant force. We plan on having some joint campaigns. The United National Movement plans on having also party campaigns and regions to raise awareness on the importance of non-cooperation and to prepare to prepare for forming an alternative, because I think the other thing that I want to be entirely open about is that it's very important both for the Georgian people as well as for Georgia's international partners to see a credible alternative. And that is something that, you know, oftentimes is not as crystal clear to some, including in this country, but more so, I would say, among our international friends, what that credible alternative really looks like. And again, I'm proud to represent the United National Movement, which even in the latest European Parliament resolution was coined as the flag bearer for Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration. Personally, President Saakashvili did tremendous work, and his courage and his vision and the reforms that were implemented under his leadership really allowed Georgia to shed its corrupt, criminal Soviet debris and emerge as a state that had a European future, a Euro-Atlantic future. For that, I will always be, proud for what this party has done, but I also believe this party has the vision and the potential to serve my country's national interest going forward. So not just a relic of the past, but rather a strong political force of the future. And that's how I want UNM to position itself, because this is such a unique opportunity for Georgia, geopolitically speaking, to really open negotiations with the European Union on accession, and within a few years be a full member of the EU. I mean, the Baltic states opened negotiations, and within 4 years they were full members. It's possible. It's doable. We can do it. We can really do it. We can deliver on these reforms. We can deliver on the democratization. And we can have real stability, real peace, not this delusional lie that the Georgian dream calls peace, but rather is collaboration and subservience to Russia. I mean, that's what the Georgian dream has been trying to sell to the Georgian public.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that this window of opportunity, the golden window of opportunity, is open, and its membership of the European Union is within reach. That was unthinkable, in the past. But none of that is going to happen if we are not able to push Ivanishvili out of power. So this is a very simple thing. And coming back to that, the last week I had Professor Hans Gudbrod on my on the show, and what he said was that, again, if you only count on protest, no matter how big or small, and think that you will be there on Rustaveli Avenue in big numbers, and then at some point cavalry will arrive in the form of sanctions, that wouldn't be enough to defeat Ivanishvili. What he said, and I'm not quoting him, but whatever, he said something like similar to that, and I also agree with that the opposition should need a strategy. And this strategy should contain 3 pillars. The first, he said that, opposition needs to pierce the bubble and appeal national sentiments in Georgia. So nowadays, still, opposition groups are boiling in their own baskets or in their own bubbles, and they are not able to reach out to neutral or Georgian dream audience or supporters. Second thing, what they said, that if opposition is not able to disrupt the decision-making process of Ivanishvili and his vertical, nothing will come out. Only piercing the bubble, only standing on Rustaveli Avenue, maybe in a huge numbers, still wouldn't be enough. And third, what he said was that you need to revive hope that you are strong enough to defeat Ivanishvili. That people should believe in that there is Tina here, or there is somebody else there, who will lift the flag while some of the others in prison, and will defeat Ivanishvili, maybe in the elections, maybe in the street, maybe somewhere else. I don't know, I just put these things on the table. Okay, how far you agree or disagree with some of those elements that I brought in?
No, I agree with all three. I think Hans is totally right that that looks like a good to-do list for the opposition. Part of the problem, obviously, has been that in the 13 years that Ivanishvili has captured the Georgian state, essentially, no single leader from the opposition has emerged as a unifying figure, right? I mean, God only knows how long the Shevardnadze regime would have lasted if then, I think he was 36-year-old, Mikhail Saakashvili hadn't emerged as a figure who was able to unify disparate political forces and show the kind of vision and strength and courage and charisma that really brought people together, right? I mean, I think that leadership vacuum certainly is a serious problem that Ivanishvili plays off of. And that's not necessarily because we all lack charisma or courage, but, you know, Ivanishvili also, in a very Russian, cynical, Putinist way, is also very deliberate in making sure that he causes these divisions, that he uses disinformation and propaganda to alienate people from political leaders, to stigmatize them, to, you know, the use of disinformation is a means of hybrid warfare against the personas who might have the potential for emerging as single unifying figures. So we mustn't be entirely self-depreciating, although we must also be realistic that, you know, that really is a problem. I think the person that came the closest to having had that role of a unifier or a catalyst, if I may put it, was Salome Zurabishvili. And that was immediately after the October parliamentary elections, where I think she made a very courageous statement on having called out the fraud and having evaluated the parliamentary election as a Russian special operation against the Georgian people. I think at that point she had tremendous trust from the public, and you could definitely feel it in the energy that was exuded when she appeared in the crowds on Rustaveli. We were there, we know. But I think that it was sort of a lost window of opportunity for her. And, you know, those are just leadership qualities, I suppose, that one must show. And unfortunately, she was unable to use that unique moment when she could have acted as a unifier. So it's a foregone opportunity at this point, unfortunately.
So we could endlessly discuss some of those issues, and it's indeed very interesting, but time is against us. Anything else you would like to add to the podcast?
Well, you mentioned hope, and I certainly want to add on a hopeful note, because, yes, the situation is very difficult. Most of my colleagues are under arrest. We also, you know, face that threat every day, but nevertheless, I'm extremely hopeful that Georgia will be able to resolve this crisis. You know, we didn't have a chance to discuss the regional situation, but what's happening in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, with Turkey, with the U.S. ambassador to Turkey recently stating that the United States might lease the Zangezur corridor for 100 years, which means that with that route being open, Georgia might essentially be relegated to a geographical dead end unless we are able to prove to our neighbors and to our partners that, in fact, we can be a reliable partner. The entire network of which Georgia was supposed to be part as part of the middle corridor, etc., might all be rerouted to essentially exclude Georgia. And that is a very grim prospect. But I am hopeful that we will be able together to break through the current impasse that Ivanishvili has brought upon us, because that's precisely what Russia has always wanted, to leave Georgia out of options, and therefore as its backyard that just simply has no other option. Friends of trade, of security guarantees, or anything else. So yes, the dangers and the risks are very serious, but I think that our history shows, and also the protest, to me, is also always the glimmer of hope that we need, that we will persevere, and that our resilience will allow us to break the impasse and to revert onto the path that was historically chosen by Georgians, and that is a path to the European family of nations.
Thank you very much, Tina, for being on the show, for your time. I wish you all the success. Thanks for watching us, listening to us. Please like us, subscribe to us, and I'll see you next week.